friends listening to the Stones.
But that's the second. You're already on to the high school Stony era. You know what I mean? Like I had a different relationship with the Stones.
So that's like my relationship with like Culture Club. You know, it's like, oh, you know what I mean?
You remember where you were when he said, "Do you want to hurt me?"
By the way, on driving down to Princeton Day, the Waze, you can now have Boy George as the voice of your narration on.
No way.
Does that cost more money?
I didn't click on it yet, but I'll try.
Do you have to pay a royalty to him?
He did. Maybe they paid him just to make it interesting. We don't have to necessarily pay him. It doesn't always work that way.
Right.
Someone else might pay him.
Yeah.
So I'll jump back in and say, this is a personal preference. I don't think I don't count that the fact that they're particularly popular to have anything to do with whether or not I like them or not. Although I have to admit, I don't know as much about music as many others, but I certainly know what I like, and I have a very pompous attitude about the music I like. I'll own that. I just find the Stones a little basic for me.
Well, I get that. It's honestly the only thing that ruffles me is when you say no influence. I mean, there's like undeniable. It's like saying like the guy who added the sixth string to the guitar didn't influence music. I mean, the Stones are just so ever present.
So I
when the riff comes down for "Can't You Hear Me Knocking," like that, you just don't go, oh,
Who wrote that riff? Do you know? Was that Mick Taylor or Keith Richards?
Doug, hold on. You're in the movie theater and a Marty Scorsese movie's come on, and "Can You Hear Me Knocking" is blasting on the soundtrack.
What was playing when the helicopter is following them around?
You want to see helicopters? Yeah, isn't that's "Can You Hear Me Knocking," I believe. I don't remember. It's Monkey Man. He uses the same two songs. I would go with "Can You Hear Me Knocking" with Scorsese. He used it in a couple of times. His editor.
I'll have to check that out. So I'm not looking to create. I think John is unfrozen there. Yeah. I'm not looking to create extra argument. But for me, I find the Stones to be underwhelming at times, though when they do it right. And this was funny, I was telling my wife Jen about that. I mean, you guys know who my wife is, but nobody else does. I said to Jen, we were talking, and I said the funny thing is I thought the Stones' best song was the one that John said was the song he liked the least,
which was
"Gimme Shelter."
No, that's one of my favorite.
Oh, is it? Maybe I misheard you. I thought you were just I
typed it wrong. That maybe I was saying.
Oh, okay.
The exception of I think what I said is what I like least is their political songs, with the exception being "Gimme."
Okay, now I understand. Well, their political songs are a little too heavy-handed, right? They're not real. They shouldn't really be a political band. There's nothing subtle about their message.
The same way they made a psychedelic record.
Right.
Yeah. That's what I was going to bring up. You guys disparaged that. I like that record. I like songs on that record.
Which one is that?
There's songs on that record. I think like 2000.
Yeah. Only because John and I had just got back from Vietnam right around that time, and that was probably
you're a little edgy,
it was insulting to us. That's all. But you guys are much younger.
Citadel, I like the Citadel. I wanted to play that.
2000.
I like that
From
one
Home
too.
is one of their best songs too. I love that.
There's no doubt.
Citadel, Bill Wyman's song.
I'd like to throw a new curveball to you.
Ethan would say the same thing, by the way. Ethan would be on that,
okay.
The Stones, blah, blah, blah. On the other hand, he recognizes on that record, you're like, yeah, but I like, 2,000 light years from home. You just do.
It's a 40,
is that by the Plimsolls?
Yeah. That's, I think you're thinking of the Proclaimers. I would walk 2,000 miles.
But it shouldn't be confused at all with the song I just mentioned, by the way. Sorry that you don't know it, Doug.
Hey, I want you to know that I listened to over 2 hours of you guys talking to Ethan. And
nice.
If he's willing to chat with you for 2 hours, then he should be part of our thread on our discussions.
It's in his rider. In his rider to be on the show he excludes him from
his stories are fantastic. His story about meeting Richard Nixon is fantastic.
That is one of the best
in
stories.
Paramus.
Yes.
In Paramus
that's episode 19, I believe, or 21.
That's 22? Right. At 20.
So we have the late 60s, and as you essentially have 3 albums that come out around the same time that are considered to be like changing of the whole culture, right? So you have Sgt. Pepper,
67.
you have Pet Sounds,
66,
and then which is the Stones version? Is that Satanic Majesty's Request?
No one put that as that important.
Nice.
Oh no, I'm just asking.
Awesome.
What would be the Stones version of their psychedelic album to kind of? Okay.
The Pet Sounds is not a psychedelic record. That would be Smiley Smile, which was the
So I'll refine it. That
which was Smile.
There are three.
became Smile in 2015 or something.
Yeah,
correct.
I don't know anything about the Beach Boys, but I would contend at that time in music, Bob Dylan's John Wesley Harding is the antithesis of the studio trickery, but is infinitely more interesting to me because
of this show. We've
no
right.
I'm gonna say that the imagery that he paints with the lyrics of those songs, I think, beautifully typify the acid trip that was the late 60s.
Have you ever heard anyone? So I read something where it was briefly mentioned that like the writer posited that they were not sure if Dylan was actually poking fun at that and did it like there was a certain tongue-in-cheek element to do it. We all look back at it as genius, and the Beatles followed with the White Album, of course, and then
go back to Jump
bands, everybody does back to the Earth kind of stuff. But like, did Dylan like you got to give him credit for it, but at the same time, did he do it? Was he serious, or was there a certain tongue-in-cheek element?
Just put it in Dylan's career, right? So Dylan puts out Blonde on Blonde in like April of '66, right? And he is on his rampage. That's his 3rd album.
That's that early in '66. I didn't even realize it was even 65.
That. So remember, I was actually just looking at this like the other day. So he puts out Bringing Them All Back Home in like March of '65. Then in August of '65, he puts out Highway 61, and then in April he puts out a double Blonde on Blonde. That has to be the most amazing.
Well, and it's 3 albums essentially fueled by amphetamines, right, from what history suggests, right? And then he may or may not have broken his neck.
Yeah, then he has the motorcycle accident,
and he disappears.
And then constantly on the road, like he had like an.
Can we get back to that at some point, Doug? You got any insider dope on that?
I would suggest. I'm a neophyte when it compared to your library of what you've read. I don't read about rock and roll music. These days
live it.
Well, if I read anything long enough these days, I just doze off. But from my understanding, I don't think Dylan put out John Wesley Harding as any response or tongue-in-cheek. I think it depends. The problem with Dylan is that you can't separate the myth from what may have actually happened, because he likes the myth.
That's what I was asking. Did he break his neck?
No, some suggest that he wasn't as injured as it was suggested, and he needed to take the time off.
Heard that.
Also, by the way, before John was in, he makes all the basement tapes with the band before making.
Yeah, but he wasn't intending on those to be released. They just recorded them jerking around.
And they printed acetates of different songs. That's how Man did Win the Eskimo, and he was out. Albert Grossman was out hustling songs. But I think what happened. He's out there. He kind of vaguely references it a little in there was an interview in Vanity Fair where he said like the sun was in his eyes and he wiped out. And so how hurt he is, he ends up in the hospital. He essentially has to go cold turkey off for the amphetamines too, I think is kind of part of it. And he's been on this whirlwind tour when touring was no fucking fun. Like, you know what I mean? It was like, this is pre, 69, 68, where you're bringing your own sound system. This is still how we talk about the Stones playing, or the Beatles playing stadiums through the PA. He's doing theaters at least, but he's also playing Forest Hills Tennis Stadium, and he's doing the Hollywood Bowl. But he's also going off to Australia. Imagine going to Australia in '65 was like.
Well, but John, from the few things I've read, he also took a break because at that point he's starting to have a split from who's the manager?
Albert
Grossman?
Yeah.
Albert Grossman. And I even, from what I understand, the song Dear Landlord is really meant of him begging Grossman to get him out of, he doesn't want to be associated with Grossman anymore. The thing I love about the Dylan album is not one flyer was printed. There was no advertising. It just shows up on the shelves.
John Wesley
Harding just shows up on the shelves. And in my opinion,
December 67,
yeah,
right,
so
John?
think about it. He's cranked out, you've gotten 4 albums worth since Blonde on Blonde's a double. Literally like clockwork. It was like 2 albums a year for his whole career. Then all of a sudden he goes like, oh my gosh, is he dead? What happened to him? Whatever. And he's a total prophet at this time too, right? You know, and so he's gone from 66 to 67. That was like forever.
And you don't find any band, I mean, I don't know, again, I preface this by saying I don't know the history, but find any musician or band that can produce that quality, top-notch, amazing music, cutting edge over the course of 3 or 4 years without a dud.
That's amazing.
The Beatles. That's what we do a show.
All right, so I'll give you the Beatles for that.
They check it out.
On Stitcher.
Yeah. But the Beatles were prolific. But you know, Dylan does that, and if you hear the songs, there's these gorgeous near biblical parables about life. It's surrealistic and trippy as anything else.
He's arguably one of arguably the greatest songwriter of the last. You know what I mean? It's like.
I wouldn't argue with that.
That's what I'm saying. It's like he's definitely up there. Like you can't like dismiss him, right? And no one's saying, oh, you know, Jagger Richards are up there too. No,
I'm not saying. I'm just saying that for the sake of argument, you know, there's this time from say 67 to 69 where these huge production albums are coming out, like Sgt. Pepper, like. You know, all of a sudden everyone is wearing paisley and going nutty, and Dylan comes out essentially with an acoustic album.
Or Surrealistic Pillow, right? Surrealistic Pillow.
Yeah, and if I'm not mistaken,
like,
Surrealistic Pillow at times comes off as both dated and insincere.
Yeah.
Like people love that record, and they talk up that band as like this unbelievably important band, and I'm a little dismissive of Jefferson
I totally
Airplane.
agree with you, but Jefferson Airplane in that period where they prodded the mainstream, right? The same way like Dylan would go and like make like right. So if this goes back to everyone's relationship with the press, we always talk about how the Beatles, like the press loved them because it's like they joked around and they gave it back, and it was playful. And then Dylan start like there's a famous interview in Don't Look Back where he's like giving the Time magazine. He's like you're trying to tell me you're important. You're from News. You know,
right.
Come on.
Well, he taunts them.
News once a week in a friggin', you know, it's like, come on, wait, you know, and he's totally taunting him. And then you have Jefferson Airplane where it's like, yeah, Tricia Nixon's a fan of ours. We're going to go to the White House and put acid in the water when we go, you know, and it's like, and
it's a different, like that's stupid though. That's like,
that's got nothing to do with the music.
Like, exactly.
But like, meanwhile, like, you know, Lou Reed is walking and talking and they're putting tracks down. You know, that's the part of whenever I go Jefferson Airplane, I go, and I recognize that like the Velvet Underground are not selling records, and yet they existed at the same time. And I would like, like that hippy dippy trippy stuff does not speak to the 21st century, in my opinion. No, whereas the Velvet Underground are timeless now.
The summer. Even famously, the hippies of San Francisco had the funeral for the hippie in 1967. They think like like, you know, like everyone else. I forget the Woody Allen movie that's actually really good where they travel in time and go back to France.
Yeah, it's great.
Right? And then but the people there are talking about, oh, we missed the great Belly Pock period. Like everyone thinks the period before, right? So it's like, you know, you missed it. You know,
John, or Chris, I don't know how much Tony reads, but God, is there any record of Dylan spending any time with Lou Reed when Dylan spends a little time with the Andy Warhol studio? Who's that woman who brings him upstairs?
Edie Sedgwick.
Yeah. No, Edie Sedgwick. Yeah.
Edie did? Is that right?
Nico. So you're like they really don't even overlap with each other, right? It's like I don't know if there is a period where because the Velvet Underground sort of began to exist